You know, if you just look around you right now, pretty much everything you see, maybe the device you're listening on, the chair you're sitting in, it probably got there thanks to a truck driver. They really are this invisible force keeping everything moving. But today, we're doing a deep dive, not into the cargo they haul, but into this unseen weight they carry. We're talking pressure, fatigue, and maybe the toughest part, this really intense chronic isolation. We're zeroing in on what the research is calling the loneliness epidemic in trucking. It's driving a pretty serious mental health crisis, and the sources we've looked at, they paint a really clear and honestly quite heartbreaking picture of the human cost behind all the logistics that fuel our lives.
That's exactly it, and that's the critical thing we need to unpack today. For you listening, our goal isn't just to say, oh, it's stressful. We want to understand why this isolation runs so deep, look at how it directly impacts safety, impacts business stability too, and then, really importantly, explore some of the innovative ways the industry is starting, finally, to respond, recognizing that driver well-being isn't a perk, it's fundamental.
Okay, let's start right there then. Defining the problem. When we talk about isolation in trucking, it's different, isn't it? It's not like being alone in an office.
Not at all.
The sources really emphasize that for these drivers, community, family chats, just basic human connection, it all gets replaced by the hum of the engine, day in, day out. The road becomes their world.
Exactly. And it's the scale of that constant movement that turns simple solitude into something much more damaging, chronic loneliness. We're talking about drivers spending sometimes up to 300 days a year out there, living in their cabs.
300 days. That's almost a full year away from home, away from family, friends.
Yeah, missing birthdays, kids' school plays, anniversaries, all those small, vital moments that, anchor us.
And the data we've seen shows this isn't just about feeling blue or having a bad day. This kind of isolation, it carries a serious long-term health cost, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's not just in your head. Chronic loneliness is a physical risk factor. Serious stuff. Research links it directly to a higher risk of heart disease, increased anxiety, pretty severe depression, and even, shockingly, a higher chance of dying earlier.
Wow.
In an industry where we talk so much about physical health for safety, this psychological burden takes this silent physical toll that we just can't ignore anymore. And the numbers specific to trucking, they are really alarming. We found nearly 28% of drivers report feeling deeply lonely.
Almost a third.
Yeah, and 27% say they're actively battling depression. But the figure that really stops you in your tracks, trucking has one of the highest work-related suicide risks of any job sector in the U.S.
That's staggering. A silent emergency, just like you said.
It really is.
And what's so, I don't know, frustrating maybe is the disconnect. The industry pours money into physical safety, seatbelts, rest breaks, checking the trucks, all crucial, obviously. But with stats like those, these terrible numbers on mental distress, why has mental safety felt like such an afterthought for so long?
Well, it comes with this deep systemic cost. And that cost really brings us straight into the roadblocks, the systemic issues. We have to look at the culture, the sort of historical ingrained culture of trucking, which is fiercely proud of its independence, its self-reliance.
Right, that get it done, tough it out mentality, it's celebrated, but our sources are saying it's actually become a huge barrier. Is that right?
It's like an invisible wall, yeah. Drivers are understandably very protective of their image, their job security. There's this real fear that admitting they're struggling mentally, even just saying, I'm incredibly lonely out here, could be seen as weakness.
Weakness, or maybe even grounds for losing their job.
That's the underlying fear. The risk of a fitness for duty evaluation, potentially losing their commercial driver's license, their entire livelihood. So many suffer in silence.
So the culture actually creates this twisted incentive. Hide the struggle to keep the job, even though hiding it probably makes them less safe, less effective in the long run.
Precisely. And a lot of the advocates we read about are arguing for this shift, this need to redefine what strength actually means in this job. Real professional strength isn't just gritting your teeth. It's knowing when the job's demands are overwhelming you and having the courage to ask for help.
Okay, but even if a driver gets past that cultural hurdle, wants help, they then run into massive practical problems, right? Logistical hurdles.
Yeah.
We talk about telehealth being a game changer in medicine, but how does that work when your office is literally an 80,000-pound truck moving across the country?
Well, it sounds like a neat solution, but the reality on the road is pretty harsh. First off, just scheduling anything regular, almost impossible when you're constantly moving. Texas one week, maybe Maine the next.
Right.
But the really big issues are privacy and just basic connectivity.
Okay.
Try having a confidential hour-long therapy chat. You need decent internet, which, as anyone who travels knows, can be incredibly patchy at truck stops or out on the highway.
Yeah, notoriously bad sometimes.
And maybe even more critical, where do you have that private conversation? You're in your cab, maybe a noisy truck stop lounge. How can you open up about deep-seated anxiety or depression when the driver parked next to you might overhear everything? There's just no truly private space.
That really puts it into perspective. It's not just that help is hard to find. The job's physical environment actively works against getting help, even when it exists.
Exactly. And then you add on the fact that many drivers, frankly, just don't even know what resources are available through their companies, like employee assistance programs, or how to navigate them if they do.
So it's this perfect storm. Isolation inherent in the job, the stigma against showing vulnerability, and then huge practical barriers to actually accessing care.
It is. And the fallout from all that unmet need, it doesn't just stay in the driver's head. It spills over directly into every other part of the job, especially safety.
Okay, let's shift to that safety. If a driver is dealing with chronic depression or that intense loneliness, how does that actually show up on the road? It can't just be an emotional thing. It has to impact their driving cognitively.
Oh, absolutely. It's entirely cognitive. When your brain is under that kind of chronic stress or dealing with depression, its ability to process information degrades. It just slows down. And we see this play out in really tangible safety risks. Things like significantly slower reaction times if something unexpected happens on the road.
Like needing to brake suddenly.
Exactly. Or reduced ability to stay focused during those long, monotonous hours behind the wheel. Decision-making gets compromised, especially in tricky traffic situations. That emotional struggle essentially widens the margin for error. So yes, loneliness and depression translate directly to a higher risk of accidents.
And beyond the awful human cost of accidents, this must hit the companies hard too, right? On the business side, the bottom line.
Hugely. This is where mental health connects directly to the fleet's financial health and stability. That emotional strain is a major driver of the industry's notoriously high turnover rates. Drivers just burn out and leave.
And replacing a driver isn't cheap.
It's incredibly expensive. You're not just talking about placing an ad. It's recruitment costs, background checks, drug tests, all the training, the orientation for the new person. It adds up fast. But the costs go deeper. High turnover often correlates with more accidents, which means higher insurance premiums for the whole fleet.
Right.
Plus, constantly shuffling drivers means unstable staffing, which can lead to delayed deliveries, missed customer commitments. It slows down the whole supply chain.
So the message from the research is pretty clear then.
Unambiguous. Investing in driver mental health isn't just a nice thing to do. It's one of the smartest financial and safety investments a fleet can make. Safer roads, more stable companies. It really does start with healthier drivers.
Okay, the picture you've painted is pretty bleak in some ways. But the crucial thing here in what our sources highlight is that this is starting to change. People are noticing. We're moving beyond seeing driver well-being as just a personal problem and starting to treat it as a shared operational responsibility.
That recognition is absolutely key. And we are seeing fleets now moving past those generic one-size-fits-all EAPs. They're starting to implement programs designed specifically for the realities of trucking, the constant movement, the isolation.
Like what kinds of things are working?
Well, for instance, many are launching 247 telehealth services that are properly mobile-friendly. And crucially, these aren't just for scheduling future appointments. They're set up to handle immediate mental health crises, offer support in shorter chunks, maybe during a fuel break or a short stop, and they're staffing hotlines with people who actually understand the specific pressures of driving for a living.
So real-time support that fits the job. That makes sense. But what about that core issue of isolation? How do you tackle that when the job, by its nature, means being alone for weeks or months?
That's where things like peer support networks are proving really valuable. Fleets are helping set up these often virtual communities, safe spaces where drivers can connect with other drivers, share what they're going through without worrying about management hearing it or judging them.
Drivers talking to drivers.
Exactly. It helps normalize the struggles, shows them they aren't alone in feeling this way, and it subtly shifts that definition of strength, showing that it's okay, even strong, to share vulnerability. And we're also seeing a big push towards training the people who interact with drivers every single day. The dispatchers, the fleet managers.
The front line.
Right. They're getting training in mental health literacy, how to spot signs of distress, how to have those potentially difficult but compassionate wellness check-in conversations. basically equipping them to be the first line of defense, to connect a driver with help before things reach a crisis point.
And I thought one of the really powerful things we saw mentioned was the focus on family connection.
Yes.
Fleets actively trying to bridge that gap, doing things like virtual family game nights or making sure drivers have the tech and data for regular video calls home.
It seems simple, but just strengthening that link between the road and home life can make a massive difference in combating that feeling of being completely cut off.
Definitely. And we should also mention the preventative stuff too, right? The education side.
Absolutely vital. Fleets are investing in training on things like mindfulness, practical stress reduction techniques drivers can use in the cab, and really detailed education on sleep hygiene.
Sleep is huge in this job.
It's critical because we know poor sleep, which is rampant in trucking, just makes symptoms of depression and anxiety much, much worse. It creates this vicious cycle with the isolation.
So really treating mental health with the same seriousness as, say, checking the tire pressure.
That's the goal. That's what defines success here. Treating it as just as vital as vehicle maintenance. So if we had to boil down the biggest takeaway from all this research we looked at, I think it's this. Trucking is absolutely essential to our economy. It's the lifeblood. But it just cannot keep running safely or efficiently if the people operating those trucks are running on empty, emotionally and mentally. Prioritizing driver mental health. It's not an optional extra anymore. It's really a fundamental requirement for operational success and, frankly, for public safety.
Absolutely. And for you listening right now, whether you're directly involved in the industry, maybe you're a fleet leader, a dispatcher, a driver's family member, or even if you just benefit from the things trucks deliver every day, you actually have a role here. We all need to champion this conversation, be willing to offer a genuine listening ear, maybe share reliable resources if we know someone's struggling. Real support means looking beyond the 18-wheeler and seeing the professional inside who might be carrying this incredibly heavy, silent burden.
Yeah, and that raises one final thought for you to mull over after this. This loneliness epidemic, it doesn't have to be trucking's silent crisis forever. Recognizing these unseen struggles, bringing them out in the open, that's the first essential step. It's the start of making trucking a healthier, maybe even a more hopeful journey for the people involved. So perhaps consider, how can we, collectively, as a society, help lift that heavy backpack of chronic isolation off the shoulders of the people who genuinely keep our world moving?